Like, and then obviously we have to talk about the peripheral circulations. We'll talk about that when we get there, right? Now, you know what happens is that in the bone marrow house, the hematopoietic stem cells, as I was talking about, right? There are different types of hematopoietic stem cells. One of the most important hematopoietic stem cells is called the pluripotent stem cells, okay? And this is called, let's say, pluripotent stem cell. It's called pluripotent stem cells, okay? And what does this means is like basically the pluripotent means like it can give rise to all different types of cells in our body. That's what it means. Okay, it can give different types of cells in our body. That's what these are called pluripotent cells. They're also called multipotent cells, as we talk about that too. And they can give rise to the single line of progeny, okay, or single line of series, right? And there's also something called totipotent cell, which basically means that if this is a cell, then it can give rise to one, just like all the toti means total, the potency to give rise to the one cells with all the cells, right? It would not give rise to all the different types of cells. That's what totipotent basically means, right? Now, for our case, we're gonna focus more on the pluripotent cell because this is what giving rise to all different types of cells in our body, right? And what happens with the pluripotent cells is that this pluripotent stem cell with a certain growth factors, right? Remember, like stromal derived factor number 1, or even ISCT. c-KIT ligand molecules, right? Or interleukin 3, they will actually give rise to these two guys, and let's make this as two guys, like right here. And then this guys is going to be what? So these guys give rise to right here. Let's make this as, these guys will give rise to these cells, and these cells are going to be what? All right. Now, they're going to give rise to two different cells, which are called, one of those things is called common. Okay, common, it's called lymphoid, I think it's lymphoid, it's spelling like that, PHOID, okay, lymphoid lineage, all right, and this one is going to be common, okay, myeloid, okay, lineage, it's giving a common lineage, and these two different cells which give by, we call these are multipotent cells, right? Because these are called multipotent stem cells, and these are all stem cells. Because remember, stem cells that it can make its own cells, okay, and then also it can give rise to all the different types of cells, okay. But these are common because this is going to make a lymphoid series, and this is going to make the myeloid series. And as we go, we'll talk about it, what does this mean to, right? Now, what happens with this? The common lymphoid lineage is obviously this is gonna proliferate because this is a proliferation phase, right? Because stem cells unique properties, they do mitosis process, okay, they proliferate, okay, and this phase is called, let's say, undifferentiated phase, like they're undifferentiated, okay, they're going to be proliferate, okay, that's what these guys are going to do. So this undifferentiated phase, what happens is they're going to get proliferate, obviously, and then it's going to give rise to, like obviously from this one, it's going to maintain its own population, but it's also going to give rise to something else. These are multipotent cells which have single line progenies. Basically, it's going to give rise to single line cells, and now it's going to give rise to obviously the same thing called, which is obviously going to be my lymphoblast. And what does a blast means? Blast basically means a rapidly growing cells. Rapidly proliferating cells are called blast cells, right? Now it's going to give rise to, and this is going to be obviously. This is committed to make something. So we can call this as like a committed, we can call them a committed, okay, committed stem cells, or you can also say that as this as a colony forming unit lymphoblast cells, okay? So I can say that are committed colony forming, I can just say CFU lymphoblasts, all right? Now, what happens with this lymphoblast is it's gonna get actually differentiate into, because it's going to maintain its whole population, and it's going to divide into a couple of things. Actually, it's going to divide into, when this case guys become this is going to differentiate into one of the series. Let's make this as, it's called lymphocyte, okay. Now it's going to do, and this is obviously it's a pro, right? So that means it's going to be colony forming unit pro-lymphocytes, because it's going to get differentiated into its pro, means still it's in a differentiated form. And with this one, what's going to happen is that these guys will give rise into two things. Let me write down as a pro NK cell, and then it's going to be pro B cell, and then pro T cell. All right, now this is very, very important concept because guys, because this pro lymphocytes, what's going to happen is that which are differentiated into the pro NK cell, pro B cells, and these guys are committed to make like natural killer cells. This is going to make committed to make a B cells, and these guys are committed to make like a T cells, and these are very important, right? And then what happens is like once these are still like these guys are undifferentiated proliferating cells, right? And what happens is that when they go to like blood circulations, what happens is that these guys get mature. Okay, let's make this as a make this in red. When they go to blood circulation, especially natural killer cells, what they'll do is they will get mature and they'll become something else. And these guys will become, let's make this as a circulation, right? Now, when these guys go to the natural killer cells obviously, this is gonna be, let's make this as a, this natural killer cells, all right? What's going to happen with the natural killer cells is that the natural killer cells obviously going to get mature here and become natural killer cells. Look, one of the important things about natural killers is that they do not have any sort of like a surface markers on the natural killer cells, okay? So it's very important that you should know this, right? Now, because these are important for like actually killing pathogens and especially killing cells, infected cells. These are natural killer cells, are infected cells, okay? So that's very important, and we'll talk about that as in immunology. And then let's quickly talk about the T cells, and then we'll talk about B cells. And then what happens with the pro T cells? They go to like blood circulations, okay? And what happens is that they actually don't get mature in the circulations. What happens is that they go to like thymus. They go to thymus, okay? And then in thymus, what happens? That's where the word T comes from there because it's referring to the thymus. That's where they get matured in thymus, okay? And then after peripheral circulations, obviously these guys from the bone marrow house, okay, from the vascular sinus wall, they actually go to the peripheral circulations, and these guys go to actually a thymus. That's what they get actually matured, and then they'll come out as a mature. And when they're matured, like for example, let's say if I make a T helper naive cells, and then the other one is the other one is going to be actually, these are going to be like CT. They get a marker, and these are going to be a CD3 positive cells, like, and they come out as two type of different cells. One is going to be a CD4 positive cells, and another one is going to be CD8 positive cells. Like, look, all the CD8 cells we refer to as the markers, okay, and these are called cytotoxic cells, okay, and we'll talk about immunology. And then CD3 and CD3 part, these are called T helper naive cells, okay. If I could make this a T helper naive cells, because what happens is that these guys are important for making like T helper 1 and then T helper 2 cells, okay. And then what happens is that this T helper ones, this is what the T helper 1, T helper 2 cells makes by the CD3 and CD4 positive, and all these CD3 and CD8, they are going to be a cytotoxic cells. And when we talk about T cells, lymphocytes in immunology, we'll talk more about this. But after that, what happens is that these guys will mature and become T cells, like T lymphocytes. Okay, lymphocytes. Now, and the same with the B cell. What happens to the B cells? Are very important. And the T helper cells actually helps by giving some like factors, like like especially for like interleukin 4 or interleukin 5, for actually for differentiation of B cells, and also for the growth factor for the B cells, right? So they would help to make like these B cells into like antibodies, all right? Like a plasma, actually, it's a plasma, and then obviously the gamma globulins are antibodies, all right? And then B cells also differentiate into something called memory cell. All right, now, these are some of the important concepts that I want to know. And these are very important. And the B cells, it's sort of like, when you talk about immunology, it is part of like specific immune systems, or we call them adaptive immune system. But really what happens is that this only happens like after the birth, because whenever the pathogen comes in our body, or any sort of like foreign bacteria, what happens is that your B cells are important for actually making antibodies against that to kill that. Okay, so they're immune to, these are also called immune cells. They're immune to make certain types of antibodies to actually fight for the infections or fight for certain bacteria. Okay, and this is obviously this is going to be a lymphoid series. Now this phase, after we talk about this phase, this is called undifferentiated phase, or this is called a proliferation phase. And this phenomena is called differentiated phase. Okay, differentiated means these are mature cells, and we need to have mature cells, right? Because mature cells has a function. These are differentiated, but they're going to be less proliferated. That's what it is. Once the cells are differentiated, they're not going to proliferate. That's what they call site. Whenever you hear the blast basically means is that these are rapidly growing cells. That's what we call the blast cells. Because remember, later when we talk about, like, for example, if I lymphocytes, when we talk about acute lymphoblastic leukemia or something like that, that means we're talking about there's some kind of leukemia. Basically means is that these cells are rapidly growing, but they're not actually converting into mature cells. That's what these are. Acute lymphoblastic leukemia basically means is that there's a problem with the precursors of your bone marrow or bone marrow stem cells. Okay, so basically what they do is that they are rapidly growing cells. They proliferate a lot, but they do not convert into mature cells. That's what leukemia means. So if there is a precursor cells of problems, then we can call it acute lymphoblastic leukemia if there's a problem with this lineage series, okay? If there's a problem within the lymphoid series, okay? Now, once we have that, once we got this one, now let's talk about this. Also, I have to give rise, it's called common myeloid lineage, right? Now, with the common myeloid lineage, what happens is that a couple of things, because this guy is gonna differentiate it into a couple of things. Okay, let's make this in a little more top here. Okay, one of the thing is obviously going to be, we can call this as a myeloblast. Okay, one, and then other can give rise to, make it here. Okay, which is going to be like, let's make erythroblast. It's a blast, guys. And the other one is obviously going to be, let's make this as a, what is this? We'll make this as going to be our another one, and we'll draw the diagrams of this one too. And it's going to be my megakaryoblast. All right. Now, so it is giving rise to three different things. One is myeloblast, proerythroblast, and also the megakaryoblast, right? What's going to happen is that this myeloblast, or we can call this as also, it's going to give rise to like two type of things. So one is going to be, let's call this as, because it's going to differentiate into two things. One is going to be, let's make this as a granulocytes, okay, and other one is going to be a granulocytes. It's going to give rise to granulocytes and agranulocytes, which basically means is that this myeloblast, what happened is that it's going to give rise to the cells that is going to actually have granules in it. And the cell that's going to give it's going to give us rise to cells that's not going to have granules into it. That's the only difference between granulocytes and granulocytes. Basically, granulocytes basically the cells, the cytoplasm has a lot of granules into it. So when you put a dye into it, it will take the shape of that dye. That's what it means, right? Now, as we go further, what's going to happen is that this granulocyte has like further division into a couple of things. Let's talk about this, okay? Now this is very, very important. Let's make this as, and I'm going to make this as a little bit down here, okay? And we'll talk, actually, let's come back to this and let's go back to this. Actually, megakaryoblast basically means is that it's a mega means big, right? And it has a lot of this like big cells, all right? Now, the big cells. And what happens with the megakaryoblast is that with a certain types of like growth factor, like so one of the growth factors like TPO, what is that? Thrombopoietin, okay? Thrombopoietin. And then obviously there's gonna be like some of the very important like growth factors, right? And then like for example, you have a thrombopoietin, you have like SCF, like a stem cell factor. Like obviously you're gonna have a, what is this? Interleukin number 3, like this one's the growth factors, right? And also thrombopoietin, right? This will get what? as it's going to get, it will get converted into something called, you're going to get converted into something called pro, like this. And let me make this in the blue too. And you're going to have, like, make this, like this. All right, now this one is called pro, okay, mega karyocytes. Okay, and then after that, what happened with the pro megakaryocytes is this will get even bigger, okay, because as you go, these cells become bigger and bigger, right? Now, what happens is as this goes, these cells become bigger. Sorry, my diagram is probably not, but as you go, it becomes bigger. And what also happens is that when it's bigger, what happens is that these cells are going to have like this finger-like projections are coming out from the cells. Let's make this as finger-like projections like this. Okay. Now, this is called mega karyocytes. Okay. Now, this megakaryocytes, obviously, what it's going to have? It's going to have like big cells. It's a really big, it's big, right? And the differentiated cell, what happens is that it has a lot of this finger-like projection coming out of this. So what happens is like in my bone marrow house, what happens is, let's make these cells right here. Whenever, let's say this is like this cells, it would not able to go. So what happens is that it has a lot of this finger-like position coming out from these cells, right? And then obviously this is a big cell, megakaryocyte. So because of the blood flow, what happens? Because of blood flow, when the blood flow rapidly comes in, what happens is it breaks this finger-like projection. Once it breaks this finger-like projection to the cells, right, it becomes like a small like this, right? And what are these cells? Like this. These are about like 2 to 3 microns, okay? These are platelets. These are called platelets now. P-L-A-T, platelets. Oh, there's another name for platelets. It's called what? It's called thrombocytes, right? Let's write that down too. It's called thrombocytes. All right? Now, so this is the same thing, right? Now, that's what happens. Now let's talk about other one, which is going to be my proerythroblast. And for the proerythroblast, one of the most important hormones you need is erythropoietin. And erythropoietin is obviously produced by which one? Erythropoietin is obviously produced by kidney. And if you want to be very, very clear, quickly if I have to draw this, let's say this is my efferent arterioles, and this is going to be what? Efferent arterioles, and then this is going to be my glomeruloscapularies right here. Efferent arterioles, okay, this is going to be glomerulocapillaries, this is going to be efferent arterioles, and then from the efferent arterioles, there's another capillary, which is called peritubular capillaries, okay, and this is going to be our venous system, right? So what happens in the peritubular capillaries, they have this, on the capillary, they have this endothelial cells. And these endothelials are very, very sensitive to low oxygen level, okay? And these endothelial cells on the peritubular capillary, these are the guys that are actually important for synthesizing this hormone called erythropoietin. And erythropoietin is very, very important for actually prevent or to help to make the red blood cells, because this proerythroblast is nucleated cells, and these guys have a tendency to commit suicide. These guys have a tendency to go apoptosis. So if they don't get the erythropoietin hormones, they would actually go through process of apoptosis. So in order to prevent that, obviously we need the erythropoietin, right? Obviously we need SCF. We also maybe require like something called like granulomonocytes, colony stimulating factors, obviously interleukin number 3. These are the growth factors, okay? And we'll talk about the more this in immuno too. And what happens with these guys is really what happens is like they have this obviously big nucleus, right? I mean big cells, and they have like this big nucleus, and then this is a proerythroblast, and inside there there's small nuclei too, and then nuclei, and then there are chromatin, which are very, very loose, right? And as they grow mature, what happens? These cells become smaller and smaller. So this is going to be my proerythroblast, and then as these guys go, it's become little smaller, okay? And this is the nucleus becomes little condensed. And then what happens is the nuclei inside this, they start making like a lot of this ribosomes, okay? Let's say there's a lot of ribosomes, okay? And then ribosomes, when you put the DN, what happens? It will put a dye to become bluish, right? So that's what they call this as a basophilic erythroblast. All right, now, and after that, what's going to happen with this is, guys, again, as this go, because obviously for this for this this DNA to get the nuclear to maturations, you also need some of like hormones like B9 folic acid or even vitamin B12. Okay, they're required for that, for this DNA maturations or this nucleus maturations, right? And as this grow, like what happens is that these cells become smaller and smaller, and now like maybe DNA is like very, very small. There's no nucleus there. Okay, but you have lots of this. Like blue thing right here, right? And then also. What else is there? And then obviously this is where you're going to see a little bit of like maybe red too, because maybe the hemoglobin has probably appeared there too, right? And this phenomena, we call this as a polychromatic erythroblast. We call this as what? We call this as a polychromatic, all right, erythroblast. All right, and then as this go here, what's going to be the other one? Obviously this is going to go again. This is going to be smaller than this guy. Okay, and then this is now, maybe it's become very, very dense, this nucleus is, and then this is where you're going to see lots of red, okay, lots of red, all right, because of the iron, right? And then maybe a little bit of bluish here too, all right? Now this is called orthochromatic erythroblast, okay? So orthochromatic erythroblast, they also call this as a normal blast. Then after that, what's going to happen is that now in this place, you're not going to have a nucleus, okay? And then you have a lot of this red here, red, all right? And then maybe a little bit of, obviously a little bit of blue is always going to be there, all right? And then this is a little bit blue. And then this is called reticulocytes. Reticulocytes, all right? Reticulocytes. And then, or you can, then after that, what happens is that these are immature, they'll go to blood circulations and it will become your mature after like sort of 48 hours. And obviously size of that would be 7 to 8 microns, right? And this is going to be lots of red, like lots of red, very, very red, okay? And then maybe you might have a little bit of blue too, right? But not much. Okay, you should have a little bit of blue. Now this is called mature red blood cells. And remember, the further your cytoplasm to cytoplasmic maturations, what is required? What got from blue, it got become red. That's what the iron is required. For the cytoplasmic maturation, the iron is required for that, right? For the DNA to mature, okay, you need a B12 and also you need a folic acid for the DNA maturations, okay? And then this is what happens. And remember, like these steps are like very important, guys. And guys, don't like ignore this fact saying that, oh, this is a lot of detail, or you have to know all this stuff. You should remember this, because especially these reticulocytes, you should remember this, because remember, when there's a hemolysis going on, let's say whenever the anemia case, what happens is that, when the rapid distribution of red blood cells are happening, when you see the blood count, when you look at your blood report, you should see the elevated level of reticulocytes. So it's very important that you should know about the series of how this is actually happening, okay? Now after this, we have to talk about, obviously, this, let's talk about granulocytes, and we'll talk about the granulocytes a little later, okay? So the granulocytes, obviously this is a site of the myeloblasts. Okay, let me erase this and then make this as a myeloblast, which is going to give rise to a granulocyte series, okay, granulocytes, and also it's going to give rise to agranulocytes. Okay, so it's going to give rise to two other things, right? Agranule is basically, as we talked about, it doesn't have a granules, right? Now, what happens with the myeloblast is that it's very important, right? Because it's going to give something called, one of the things it's going to give rise here is called monoblast right here, right? Monoblast, okay? And we'll talk about what. And this monoblast is obviously going to be a agranulocytes, like our agranulocytes, all right? And that this is going to give obviously the myeloblast. And myeloblast has, what happens is that it's a unique property because it's going to give rise to some phenomena, like some 3 different types of sites. And these guys are going to be colony forming unit, okay? These guys are, because they have a tendency to, or you can say burst uniforming unit too, right? So this colony forming unit, okay, and this is also called colony forming unit. So this colony forming unit has a give rise to, we can say this as N-pro, what is N-pro myelocyte, okay? And other one it gives is called, let's say, E-pro myelocyte. And the other one it gives is B-pro myelo, I think it's spelling as MY, not E, myelocytes, okay? Yeah, myelocytes. So it gives NEB, and I'll tell you what exactly those means, right? NEB, right? And it gives us, these are colony forming unit, right? And these are mean, now these guys are going to go, what's going to go? They're going to differentiate and make these N cell, E cells, and B cells, we'll talk about it. And these are also going to be colony forming monoblast cells, right? So when it gives rise to the N promyelocytes, now what is going to happen with the N? These guys get differentiated from the N, it will make N, okay? It will make N, and they'll remove the pro out from here, so it'll become N myelocyte. Okay, and this will get differentiated into what is E myelocyte. Okay, E N myelocyte, right? So basically, I think it's spelling as MY, right? ELOCYT, TE. It's going to be MYELOCYT, okay? And this is going to be a B myelocyte, okay? Now, these are differentiating into, right? Because remember, guys, these we're making something. You'll see what we're talking about here. Because this guy with the N this N is referring to, let's say, neutrophils, and this E is referring to eosinophil, and this B is referring to basophil. They have a same way of this dividing these cells. Okay, there's a name. Just only difference is either it's going to make a neutrophils, or whether it's going to be eosinophil, or whether it's going to be a basophil, right? From this N myelocytes, it will divide and it will give rise. It will proliferate into something called N. Okay, what is it? From the N, we remove the pro side. Now it's going to be N meta, right? It's going to be N meta myelocyte. It's going to be N and the meta myelocyte. Okay, this is going to be a E meta myelocyte. Okay, and this is going to be a B. What is this? It's going to be B meta myelocyte. Okay, now when you have E beta, then what's going to happen? Last one, the last is very important. Just band. It's going to be they call this a band, N band, and this is E band, and this is called B band, they say. Okay, and this is the immature product, and after that, what's going to happen? These guys get matured in the peripheral circulation, and this becomes a neutrophils. And neutrophils are what? Neutrophils are like they're called polymorphonuclear. They also call that. So basically, if I make this, guys, I need like certain colors of this. If I make this has anucleated cells, right? And these guys are bilobed. Okay, let's make this a bilobed cells. How do I look this? Oh, sorry, it's like gonna be look like this, right? Like this. Like this, okay? And then these guys are, because it's neutrophils, the reason why they're neutral is because the water field, let's call this a neutral. They're also called micropolicement. Okay, these are also called micropolicement, okay? Of the white blood cells, obviously. So, and they're also called polymorphonuclear neutrophils. And these are obviously like, it can, because the reason why I call polymorphonuclear, they have, once they get mature, they can actually change it into a different types of, it can become 3 or 4 or 5 lobes too. So you can see like bunch of lobes. And then the reason why they call neutrophil is because when you put the dye, they can take both the colors. Like they can take acidic dye, red dye, and they can also take the blue dye, right? That's what and they stay in neutral position. That's what they are neutrophil, right? So they take like neutral. They have this. They also have like a red dye. Look at this. So that's why these are neutral. And film is to love, right? So now after that, let's talk about, and neutrophils are very, very important, guys. Micropolicement of our defense mechanism, and this is actually internal defense mechanism. This play a role into non-specific immune system, and when we study immunology, we'll talk about it. Because really what happens with the neutrophils is that the way it works is whenever there's inflammation process, because maybe radiations, maybe because of some bacteria, what happens is the neutrophils are very, very important for actually fight for the infections. So neutrophil count should be always good. Remember, that's why our bone marrow makes about like 16 billion neutrophils, okay? And these guys are very important to fight for infections, okay? Because if somehow the neutrophils productions are less, then we're very, very prone to have like a lot of these infections and inflammations and all that stuff, right? So to fight for the inflammations, the neutrophils is a very, very important role. And the way that actually neutrophils goes to tissue, this fundamental is called diaperesis. Okay, what happens is the blood cavity with certain type of interleukins, the macrophages produces, and then what happens is the blood cavity get constricted, and then what happens is that these neutrophils they will bind to the endothelial cells, and then after that, what happens is that because the capillaries are constricted, there's just some gap. There's some gap, and then the process of the neutrophils getting from the blood and getting marginalized to the endothelial cells, and then going to the tissue, that fundamental is called diaperesis. And we'll talk about what is that in immuno, right? Now, and remember, guys, whenever if you're rapidly making neutrophils, okay, because inflammation process in your blood river, you will see this end band being really high. Okay, so it's important because the end band is really high in your blood river. That means that you could see that, okay, maybe that means your bone marrow is working so hard to make like a lot of these neutrophils. So that the blood can tell you that, right? Now, and obviously these guys, in order for these guys to work on, obviously you need like basic one of the important, you need interleukin 3, and also you need a granulo. This is called granulo monocolony stimulating factors. These are very, very important for actually synthesizing these guys. Okay, now what is other things? Now from there, what about this E-bands? The E-bands is going to be eosinophil, right? And what is eosinophil is like, basically eosinophils is like, this is more like a bilobed structures like this, okay? It looks like a headphones, or two eyes you're looking at, you can think of that way too. And then because they're eosinophils, eosinophil means to love, so there are like acetyl, like, this eosin loving cells, you can say that. That's what these are called, eosinophil, okay? And the eosinophils are very, very important. The reason why they're very, very important is because whenever there's allergic reaction, guys, your eosinophil would be high. This is neutrophils, let's try this. Neutrophils, okay? And this is called eosinophil. Okay, sorry for this line, but and what happens when there's allergic reaction, guys? What's going to happen is that this eosinophil level will go a lot higher, and also like let's say there's a parasite in like helmet like parasite like Schistosomas. Okay, like parasites like that. Okay, in this condition, like long parasites like this, also like eosinophil will go up because they have certain enzymes they can actually from the granules they can release it, and then they can actually kill these parasites. Okay, and these guys also can release like histamine, just letting you know, right? And histamine is for what? Like vasodilation, right? Now, what is this B cells? And the B cells is obviously they're basophil, right? Obviously, it's going to be a basophil, obviously, okay, like this, and then they are very, very bluish, and then they take a basic dye. That's what they're called basophil because they love the basic side, okay? And then basophils are very, very important. In circulation, we call them a basophil, right? And then these guys are very, very important for releasing like heparin, okay? Like serotonin to heparin, serotonin. These are very important for releasing that kind of stuff. And these guys also important for like whenever there's allergic reactions. And then one of the property of the B cells are they do have like Fc portions for like, for the any sort of like IZ compound to bind into it. What does that mean? Which basically means is that whenever this in circulations, whenever they're running around, we call them as basophils. But as soon as when they go to tissue, we call them a mast cells. We can call them as a mast cell too. Like let's make this mast cells in tissue, and they have like those Fc portions and all that stuff. Okay. Mast cells, okay, and these all the eosinophil, neutrophils, and then basically they all are granular. They are all granular cells because they have the granules. Granules, look at the granules, right? And this in the cytoplasm. So because of that, like they take this certain type of the shape, like acid. That's what they're called granular cells, right? Now after that, we have one more thing to talk about, which is gonna be this monoblast or the agranulocytes, right? Agranulocytes basically they don't have any granules, right? So what happens is this monoblast is it's gonna get like proliferate into something called this promonocytes, okay? It's gonna be a because let's write it in different colors. It's gonna be a promonocytes. So it's gonna be a promonocytes, right? Now let's make this as a promonocytes. And then with the promonocytes, later what happens, it will get converted into monocytes. And then remember, Monocyte doesn't contain granules, right? These guys are like big cells like this, and we'll make this in a little bit of like a bigger cells, right? Now, one of the things you have to understand of the monocytes is like, look, monocytes, when they're circulating in the blood, they're immature. Okay, these are monocytes. They don't have any functions in there. But when they go to tissue, that's where they become macrophages when they're in tissue. Okay, but there are two types of macrophages too. Okay, one is called wandering macrophages and the other one is called fixed macrophages. Okay, what is the concept of wandering macrophages? Because some of the macrophages, there could be like some circulating down here on the blood, in the blood too, and that is called my wandering macrophages. Like you could have this sort of macrophages, and these macrophages are antigen presenting cells. Okay, these are we'll talk about in immune what are these guys means, right? That's what these are called, wandering macrophages. And macrophages like to do what? Macrophages are the big eaters, you know. They love to eat. They love to eat. Okay, they gobble up the bacteria. Oh, okay. Now, one of the concepts you have to understand is also like whenever the monocytes goes to tissue, they become the permanent resident of this tissue. Okay, like for example, let's quickly talk about this. What should I talk about? Let's erase this thing here, and then let's write it down here. Okay, let's make this. Let's say this is going to be my. Let's make this as my red blood cells right here. Okay, and this is going to be my platelets. Okay, now the platelets are more bluish. All right, now the monocytes, this macrophages, like okay, this macrophages. Okay, whenever this monocytes actually goes and let's say they go to the brain. Okay, if they go and when they become the permanent resident or like they sits there for a longer time, we call them as a microglia. So let's make this a brain, right? So if it's a brain, we call them as a microglial. Okay, if there is like let's say they go to this lung. Okay, if they're in lungs, we call them as dust cells. Okay, now if they're in like kidney, like for example, if they're in kidney, right? We call them Lasix cells, or they also call this as a mesangial cells. Okay, and then if they're in liver, we call them a Kupffer cells, and there we call them a Kupffer cells. Okay. If they're in bones, guys, what do we call them? If they're in bones, we call them an osteoblast. These are bone making cells, okay? Sorry, not osteoblast, sorry. It's called osteoclast. Okay? If they're in the like skin, we call them a Langerhans cells, right? Or if they're in the, let's say if they're in the lymphoid tissues, or we call kind of call them our histocytes, okay? Or they also called dendritic cells too. Histocytes are dendritic cells. And so these are like some of the examples like of like when the monocytes go to different tissues, there's names are changes. So if you see like Kupffer cells, so think about these guys are like the macrophages that actually stays in the liver. Okay, if you see like let's say alveoli, in alveoli we call them alveolar cells in lungs. Okay, so our dust cells you can also say because they are very important for actually finding the dust cells. Guys, some of the stuff that I want to do like let you guys know about is like we have been talking about these things like. In a very like great detail, all these things like they require like certain types of growth factors for these guys to like for these guys to get mature. Like for example, especially the common pro-monocytes, they require like interleukin number 2, like interleukin number 7, right? These are some of our growth factors. Our tumor necrosing factors. These are also called stromal derived factors. The tumor necrosing factor alpha. So these are all different growth factors. Okay, these guys are required for these guys to proliferate and differentiate into it. And with this sort of stuff like there's a lot of like clinical conditions that are associated with that. Like for example, like if I talk about let's say the deficiency on like let's say folic acid or like deficiency folic acid or let's say B12 deficiency, the vitamin which is vitamin B12. If you have deficiency on that, then obviously you're not going to make you're not going to have a DNA maturations on your erythrocyte series, right? So that in that case you can get some condition called Megaloblastic Anemia, which basically means is megan is big, right? Meaning that what happens is nucleus are supposed to what from the chromatin inside chromatin it should be from the euchromatin it become heterochromatin, and then the nucleus become very condensed and they split out, they leave the cell, right? That's why your red blood cells are anucleated cells, they do not have like nucleus, right? but in the conditions where there's B12 deficiency or B9 deficiency, the cell will become big, large, because nucleus did not leave the cells. Okay. That's what it is. If, let's say, for example, like if there's iron deficiency, it's like, so for erythrocyte series, what happens is that the ions are required for these cytoplasmic maturations, right? So your cell, your red blood cells would not be like those red or juicy, right? If that's the case, then what do we call? That means it's going to be hypochromic. Chromic means color, right? It's going to be hypochromic. And that reminds me of like white blood cells. Why do we call the white blood cells? Have you ever thought about that? The reason why we call them white blood cells is because they're colorless. They do not take hemoglobin. Because they do not take hemoglobin, they're colorless, okay? That's the reason why we call them white blood cells. Now, like for example, like all these things, there's a concept called like a leukemia. What does leukemia mean? Leukemia basically means is that if you have problems or with the malignancy with the precursors of the hematopoietic stem cells, which means that this all blast cells we're talking about. If there is all these blast cells, it could be myeloid cities, it could be like lymphoid cities. If these stems are proliferating, so rapidly, they keep proliferating. They're supposed to do that, but they do not get converted into mature cells. If they do not get actually get converted into mature cells, then obviously they would not have any function to that. That's the reason why that would give you a condition called like leukemia. And the different types of leukemia too. Like for example, if this happens in let's say if that happens in a B cells, right? There's rapidly growing B cells, then what is going to happen is that you're going to have a pro, right? Because that's a pro. So you could have like acute, meaning because this is premature, right? So you could have acute, right? Acute, like pro lymphoblastic, because these are blasts, lymphoblastic, or this is pro-B lymphoblastic leukemia, something like that, okay? So this is what they also sometimes call as ALL, right? With the pro-B cells. So these are some of the conditions that you could get. If somehow, like let's say, the productions of red blood cells, white blood cells, and also your platelets are low, then we call them as like a pancytopenia. Penia means like a low number, okay? So if that's the case, then usually what happens is, I mean, these cells are like working so less and they're not able to produce like more, like a lot of these red blood cells, white blood cells and all that stuff, because there's a problem with this bone marrow itself, and they're not able to make those synthesize a lot of these red blood cells, white blood cells, and the platelets. Then we call them as aplastic anemia, okay? And that could be because of maybe like there's growth factor deficiency. It could be because there's a malignant, some kind of problems happen. So these cells are not able to proliferate and multiply and divide and differentiate into mature cells. So in that case, like, you know, you would get like aplastic anemia, and that's usually like hereditary. It could be hereditary, right? So like, you know, it's very important to guys like understand like all, you know, like all these steps too, because as I said, like, you know, in a blood record, especially, like, you know, whenever there is a neutrophils if you synthesize neutrophil rapidly for inflammation reasons, or for radiation reasons, or for the bacterial reasons, whatever it is, you know, in your blood record, your N band will go up. In the eosinophils, in the parasites, right? Or even allergic reaction, you see like, you know, eosinophil level going high, or maybe E band going really high, or like sometimes in basophils are usually there for very, very important for allergic reactions, like, you know, hypersensitivity, like type 1, type 2 hypersensitivity, where the B band should able to go up. And then obviously macrophages will go up whenever there's a lot of bacteria are there, right? And then we'll talk about this gram-positive, gram-negative bacteria as we in like microbiology class, and then we'll talk about the role of what is the role of macrophages there too, right? Now, and obviously the platelets is very important also, because platelets are very important for like what? Like the clot formations, and it's also in order to prevent from the blood loss. These are very, very important, right? Because platelets are different factors, and they help us to prevent blood loss. And if you are actually not able to produce platelets, then we call that condition as some kind of like penia, which is going to be thrombocytopenia, okay? If you're making a lot more like platelets, then we say that thrombocytosis, okay? So whenever like we say we're making, let's say, we're making a lot of like neutrophils, then we say neutrophilia, or like if you make a lot of these white blood cells, we call them leukocytosis. These are some of like the common terms that you guys should know. One of the things like I didn't mention is like, this lymphoid comment, so this also give rise to something called lymphoid dendritic cells too. That dendrites, they have those, they're like, all these dendrites coming out from there. And then this myeloid also gives rise to like myeloid dendritic cells to like, especially from the monocytes, okay? They also give rise to like myeloid dendritic cells as well, right? Now, one of the most important things is like this bone marrow house, obviously, these cells, okay, these cells love to be in their house, which basically means these cells, let's say, all the cells, they love to be with the stromal cells, okay? Because the stromal cells are very, very important for concentrating like a lot of these growth factors, and they required for the proliferations of all these stem cells. Because of that, even though let's say the bone marrow cells the stem cells are actually floating around in the bone marrow house, later what happens is they will go and actually sit at the bone marrow itself. They don't like to stay in the peripheral for a very, very long time. They like to go in, stay in the bone marrows, okay? Even like if you give, like, for example, like, if there's stem cells, whenever you give a stem cell like transplant, right? So what happens is that they would not stay in the peripheral cells for a long time. Then what happens is that these guys will go and actually stay with the bone marrow house. Like especially the older people, as I said, they're usually the bone marrows are active in a couple of places, right? More in the membranes of bone. One is vertebra, one is sternum, one is ribs, like proximal part of your femur.